Hello, good evening everybody. My name's Damian and I feel honoured and a little bit intimidated and overwhelmed to be here tonight because I'm talking about being the change, and that implies that somewhere in my life I've been the change. And I don't think I'm an expert on this, but more somebody who's willing to share a little bit about what I've experienced in the hope that it will help make sense and might be helpful to you. When considering this topic, I read a great quote by Professor Floyd Chung in the Smith College magazine. He's working on increasing equality and diversity across the college. And before he turns his computer on every morning, he reads this quote from the Talmud, which says, "Do not be daunted by the world's grief. Do just now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it." He then goes on to state that he knows he's not alone, and there are many other groups and individuals working and pulling in the same direction to make a difference. At a time like this, it's very challenging not to be overwhelmed by the world's grief. Why even try to make a difference? How do we know that we are making a difference? What works? This is what we're going to explore over the course of this talk. When I was studying psychology, we reviewed a range of experiments by Martin Seligman from 1967. Seligman was looking at classical conditioning in dogs, and he would administer electrical shocks to dogs to see responses. He created a box where the dogs couldn't escape, and he administered an electric shock to the floor. After a short time, the dogs would give up trying to escape and they'd just lie on the floor, whimper, and just lie down. He then created a box with an obstacle in the middle, with an electric floor on one side and a normal floor on the other. When he put an average dog in on the electrified floor side and ran a current through, that dog would jump the barrier and sit on the other side. However, if he took one of the dogs that had been in one of the enclosed boxes and put them on the electrified floor, that dog would not move. It would just sit down. It wouldn't try and escape. This is an awful experiment and it wouldn't be done again today. But that experiment led to the concept of learned helplessness. The idea behind that theory is that people or animals can be conditioned to think that they have no power over their situation and they do not make any attempts to change their situation because they feel helpless. The reason I bring this up is that we can often feel this way, and particularly at the moment we can feel this way. But a good example of people feeling that way currently is the environment, and many of our young people have a genuine sense of helplessness when they consider the environment and what's going on. I work for the Wildlife Trust, and many of the young people that we work with have a sense of learned helplessness around the environment, genuine concern and eco-anxiety. So what makes a difference? Well, the thing that makes a real difference is when we work with them and we teach them ways that they can make a change and they can make a difference. A simple act of helping their parents to do the recycling, making a bug hotel, or helping to create a more wildlife-friendly school ground makes a huge difference. When we feel that we can contribute and make a difference, we don't feel helpless, we feel helpful. And we start to see ourselves as part of the solution to the issue. Small change is powerful, and research by Caroline Hickman at Bath University around eco-anxiety clearly evidences that this makes a real difference to children and young people's mental health. When we start to act and become the change, it not only helps solve the problem, it also helps us. So, what holds us back? Well, I imagine exactly the types of things that held me back from wanting to do the talk this evening. What do I know? Surely others are in a better position to do things like this. Don't I have at least one box set to still watch? I hear that Succession's pretty good. When I started doing DIY, I had limited knowledge and experience. The first job that I undertook was tiling a bathroom in an old flat that we bought in Edinburgh. Not a single wall was straight, and the floor bent off on an angle like this. So I measured up, I read books about tiling, but actually the bathroom didn't change. Then my father-in-law turned up, And he was very nice. He listened to my theories about tiling. He had a look at the job. And then he said, Damian, that's great, but sometimes you just need to do it. Get started and figure it out from there. And he was right. I started and I went for it. It wasn't perfect, and I admit there was at times a little bit of extreme Australian language, but the job was done. I did my research, so I wasn't starting from scratch. I had someone who knew what they were doing look at the job and share their experience with me, but in the end, it came down to just doing it. Okay, so we accept that we want to act justly and undertake something to make a positive change in the world. Where do we start? What do we have at our disposal? A major tool that we all have is our experience. All experience is valid. I'm obviously not saying that all experience is positive, but our experience gives us knowledge and understanding. At the time, we may not comprehend this, but on reflection, experience is a major contributor to making each of us who we are today. I have experience of teaching, residential social work, youth work, working within special needs education, working in the commercial sector, and I have degrees in education and psychology. So that tells you two things. One of which is I never planned my career, and the second is I am very old, okay? So how on earth would all of that come together? Oddly enough, I'm now the head of education and community engagement at Wiltshire Wildlife Trust, and I manage our adult wellbeing team, 2 care farms working with young people with additional needs, an education team, and a program working with unaccompanied asylum seekers, 2 cafes, and a landscaping project. Look, in reality, when I came to the trust, it was mainly education and adult wellbeing. But we looked at need, and I matched need with my experience and the skills and experience of my staff team. And then that was the basis of us starting to develop new areas of work. And that's how over the last 7 years, we've progressed to where we're at today. But experience isn't always about creating large-scale ideas or creating large-scale projects. Often, sharing our experience on a personal level can lead to real change as well. Our experience gives us an understanding of others who've experienced similar issues to ourselves. The care farm staff that we employ, many of them have struggled at school when they were younger. That experience has given them a great deal of empathy and knowledge to support and work with the children that they work with today. So, you have experience, you're up to the work, and you want to be the change, but there's so much need. Where do you start? Well, I think you need to be honest with yourself. What works for you? What is your passion? What drives you? What are you interested in? When we were developing the adult wellbeing program, we wanted to focus on men's mental health. So we spoke to a broad range of groups, from football teams to veterans. And we asked them what would work for them. And what they said is they were sick of talking therapies. They wanted to do things. So we started to do conservation with them. And when they finished clearing some scrub from an area, they said it worked for them on 2 levels. One, they could stand back and physically see the change they made and feel positive about the conservation work they'd undertaken, but working alongside our staff and being able to share their anxieties and their concerns at the time really improved their mental health as well. That's what worked for them. For me, my passion is working with children and young people and helping them to overcome difficulties in their own lives. That's what's driven me in the last 30 years of my work and my volunteering. I'm not sick of it. I learn new things every day, and I feel like I'm making a difference. That isn't to say there haven't been ups and downs. There's been successes and failures, but I'm still going and I still love it. I read a forest school report the other day for one of the young people we work with, and he's making great progress. But the staff member wrote, this young person needs to remember that in forest school, there's no right and wrong way to do things, there's only learning. And when we want to be the change, we need to remember that. Don't fear failure, value learning. As we volunteer, work to act justly, and support need, how on earth do we know that we're actually making a difference? Well, okay, there's a techie answer to this about evaluative processes, qualitative and quantitative and things like that, but for me, the key to all change is relationship. I truly believe that we're all capable of change, and change takes place through our relationships with others. This might sound grand, but it's not. We do it every day. We may not see the change ourselves, and the things that we do may impact that person's lives much later on. Lots of the work we do in conservation, we don't see for years, but we're planting, change for the future. So, change might be large or small, and we might not know, honestly, what the full extent of the change is that we've made. I was talking to a member of my team about this the other day, and she said when she was in her 20s, she was having a pretty hard time. And she bought some petrol for her car, gone in to pay for it, and the woman behind the counter in the service station was so positive, so uplifting, that it actually really had an impact on her. Now, normally, that type of thing would have really annoyed her, but actually, that was the start of her reflecting on how she might be able to see the world differently. It's like something switched in her mind, and that was the start of her starting to see things more positively and starting to change and come out of her difficulties. A small interaction had a big impact. Look, I'm sure I've not told you anything new, but hopefully I've helped you to think a little bit more about what we can do. And remember that the last bit of the quote was not the Talmud, but the bit where Professor Chung said he knew that he was not alone. There are others working to bring difference in the world as well. Let me introduce you to my mum and dad. So, they're an example that I want to use tonight. My mum's an ex-teacher who was probably depressed for 2 years following retirement because teaching had been her passion and her life. My dad was a painter decorator all of his life, and he managed our small holding until they sold up and moved into town. Now, how is this relevant? What's the point? I mean, they're lovely people, and you can see where I get my genes from, obviously. But apart from that, what's the point? So the point is this. What my mum did is she took that passion and energy and all of that enthusiasm she had and that experience she had, and she's used that now to support multiple charities. She runs garage sales, bake stalls, and loads of things. Our garage barely has room for a car. It's absolutely packed full of all of the things that people, friends, family, and strangers drop off to help her with her work. She runs a knit and natter group, which really, to be honest with you, is a support group for a number of the isolated older women in our community. And, well, my dad, that's not his bag at all, right? He supports my mum, and that helps her achieve all the activity that she does. But for him, what does he do? Well, he goes and he visits some of the older neighbours in our streets. He's 82, by the way, so they're quite old. He visits some of the older neighbours in the street, brings them fruit and veg from his garden, sits and has a cup of tea and a chat with them. Okay? They're both very different people, but they are both being the change in their community. Look around you. We are not alone. We all have the capacity to be the change, and when we work together, change happens. What are you going to do? Be the change. Thank you.